Talking with Jimmy Fortune. We're talking about his new album, Hits and Hymns, and it's a CD and a DVD that's going to be coming out in October, and we're really excited. Jimmy, we've already been hearing the music, some of the previews of the music, and it's just great. So tell people what they can expect from this album.
Well, it is called Hits and Hymns, and I teamed up with Bill Gaither and Ben Isaacs. He produced the CD, and we actually started it about a year and a half ago, and I actually got a call from Barry Jennings one day. They wanted to have a meeting and get together and talk about doing it, and it was like a God thing out of the blue. I mean, literally. But it all goes back to a guy by the name of Bill Carter, which happens to be one of my good friends, and he's always loved the Statler Brothers through the years, and I got to know him over the last few years, and he actually got me to come sing for the Johnny Cash Festival in Richter, Arkansas, a couple of years back.
Okay.
And at Arkansas State University. And I was opening for Vince Gill and the Statler Brothers, and
Nice.
Bill heard my live show there. I had a trio there that night. And he came up after the show and he said, "Look, I've got to talk to Bill. We need to do a project on you."
Yeah.
And so I said, "Hey, I'm all for it if you guys want to do it." So he got the ball rolling.
Awesome.
And so we got together, and of course Ben used to. I would run into him from time to time through the years, and he'd always say, "I'd like to produce a record on you." And lo and behold, when we had the meeting, they asked me who I'd like to produce the record. Of course, I said Ben, and he's one of my favorite producers and one of my favorite people in the first place. But I told Ben when we went into it, and we decided that we were going to do it, and after we had the meeting and everything, I said, "Look, I either produced or co-produced most everything I've done up to this point, with my career. But I said, I'm giving it totally to you."
Wow.
And I said, you do with it what you will. And he said, "No, I want your input too." And I said, "No." I said, he said, "Well, if it's something you're not happy with, you tell me." And I could not think of anything I wasn't happy with.
Wow.
I never had to tell him to change one thing or do anything, because he just had it.
Yeah, he's great.
The idea, and he actually helped me pick the songs. He pretty much picked the songs he wanted. It's called Hits and Hymns, which would be the hits on there were like Elizabeth, Too Much on My Heart. These were hits I had with the Statler Brothers.
Right.
More Than a Name on a Wall.
That you wrote all of these.
Wrote. And then there's a song called I Believe, which is the new single it's going to be the first single off the record.
Oh, good.
Which is a song that I wrote. I probably wrote it about 11 years ago, I guess. When I was leaving Virginia, it was like following what God was telling me in my heart to do. He was saying, He wanted me to. I couldn't stay there because I just built a new home up there in Virginia. And it's a long story, but I was talking to God out on my tractor one day, and He said, "You can't stay here. You've got to go." And so I put my house up for sale, sold in 4 days.
Wow.
I was on my way to Nashville. It was my dream home too. I didn't want to leave, but I was sitting out on my deck, and after I'd loaded everything out of the house, and the house was empty, and it was like God just gave me that song He said, "Here, you've obeyed me, so here's a gift to you."
Wow.
But it was such a powerful message in the song, because I could hear some children playing off in the distance, and then as I lived up on this big hill, and I could just kind of feel the wind blowing on my face, and just thinking about all the things that I was so thankful for, even in not going into an unknown territory, coming to Nashville on my own and not knowing how it was going to be, and then thinking about my mother when she passed away, and all that stuff just kind of came together, and it was like a parting gift from God to say, "Hey, you obeyed me, and so I'm going to give you this." And that song has been really powerful.
Wow.
It's touched a lot of lives, and so it had to be on the record, and so it wound up being our first single off the CD.
Oh, that's great.
And but the smartest thing Ben did was, I think, when he went into the studio, it was going to be called Hits and Hymns, and he said the hymns part of this are going to be songs like, Amazing Grace, How Great Thou Art, Victory in Jesus, Precious Memories, Rock of Ages, Just a Closer Walk with Thee, and that's just some of the songs. But he said, they've been done 1,000,000 times by 1,000,000 different people. And he said, when he sat down with the musicians and everybody, he said, "I want you approach this as if they're hearing it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all he had to tell Gordon Mote, because you know Gordon Mote's anointed anyway, so he just takes off, and everybody, the musicians, the singers, everybody on this thing was anointed right from the start. And God, I call it a God thing, how it all came together, because I don't know any other way to explain it other than the fact that when I had that talk on the tractor that day with God out on the side of the hill, I didn't want to leave where I was, because that was my dream home, and it was my family was there, and I argued with God about it, and I knew I had to be obedient, and I had to just get myself out of the way and say, well, what do you want? And he said, well, there are going to be times when you're out there playing to 10 people. There are going to be times when you're out there playing to 10,000. But I want you to honor me with your music, and whatever you do. I co-write with a lot of writers in Nashville, and whenever I do, I always approach it with, I'm not going to write about anything that's going to affect somebody in a negative way, and I want to affect people in a positive way.
Right.
And I want people to know that I was 50 years old, almost 50 years old when the Statlers retired. Started all over again.
Wow.
And then God has kept every promise that He made to me. And the key was that I had to keep my promise to Him. In that, He never let me down. He never let me fall, and just kept me upright. And then, of course, after we listened to the CD, they said, it's so good we want to do a DVD. So I got to go to Bill Gaither's studio in Indiana.
Tell me about some things that are on the DVD that are special that people might enjoy, in addition to the music.
Well, of course, on the CD, I have guest artists on there with me singing, like the Oak Ridge Boys are on there, the Isaacs are on there, the Gaither Vocal Band, Ricky Skaggs and Sharon White.
You got the cream of the crop, don't you?
And the Whites, and then, of course, Vince Gill's on there. And Daylene Vincent are on there as well. Isaacs is singing, and Bill kind of comes in as a special guest, sings as well with us on it. It's really special because I get to talk about, you get to hear stories about me being with the Statler Brothers, me also opening up for the Oak Ridge Boys after the Statler Brothers retired. You get to hear stories about me growing up in Virginia, how it was with my mother and my father, and there's some special stories about my life.
People are going to love that.
People will find interesting, because a lot of people know Jimmy Fortune of the Statler Brothers. Okay, they know my life with the Statler Brothers. They really don't know how everything came about and how I tell a story about this. Where I'm getting ready to write a book on my life, and we've started it and everything, and we're sitting there talking about it, and I have kind of a ghostwriter that's helping me with the book. And we talked about where my story begins, and he said, well, where'd your mother and father meet? When did they first meet? And I said, well, and then when I thought about it, I said, my story really doesn't begin there. My story began with, and I'll tell the story on the DVD, there was a lady by the name of Mrs. Grills, who, when my mother was born, my grandmother died 2 weeks later from blood poison. And so my mother, my grandfather was trying to raise her and 2 other kids.
Right.
And he was just really having a tough time. And Ms. Grills came from Nashville, Tennessee. She was coming up there to get a job teaching at a one-room school there. And it's nowhere, it ain't even on the map in Virginia, a place called Davis Creek, Virginia.
Oh, wow. And
she was going there to teach. And some guy on horseback stopped her and told her about what had happened with my mother and my mother's mother. And she tapped the driver on the shoulder and said, take me there, I want to go there. And she said God spoke to her at that moment and told her to go there and help him raise the children. And she went there to that house, and my grandfather moved out into the smokehouse, and she moved into the house. And she raised the kids. She raised Mom until she taught Mom the Bible. And she taught Mama about prayer and how important prayer was. She'd pray with her all the time. And my mother became a prayer warrior because of her. A lot of lives were changed because of Miss Grills. Well, when my mother got married and moved out of the house, so of course back then you didn't have cell phones. You didn't have a way to keep it. When when somebody left home, they were gone for months sometimes and never came back. When she came back, Miss Grills was gone. Miss Grills came back to Nashville, and all we ever know about her was her name was Miss Grills, and she raised my mama and taught her the Bible. And I always think she was an angel that showed up that really has affected our whole family.
Right.
Because of what she did for my mom. My mom prayed for my dad. He was an alcoholic. He became a Christian back in 1967. I saw his life change because of it. I've seen my life change because of it, because of knowing about Mrs. Grills and what she taught my mom.
Yeah.
And it affected our lives in so many ways. That one woman is still affecting our lives right today. And so I've been looking for Miss Grills, but I ain't found her yet. The only thing we know is that her name was Miss Grills. But that's kind of where my story began.
Yeah.
And then I tell the story in this in more detail, actually.
Yeah. That sounds
in the DVD.
great.
But
yeah. You were going to tell another story.
Well, a lot of people tend to think my story starts when I was hired by the Statler Brothers, but it just goes way, way back further than that.
Yeah.
And then, because when I think about, even with my mother's prayers, from Mrs. Grills teaching her about how important prayer was and teaching her the Bible, even the things that I did wrong in my life, and I went astray in my life, and I was baptized when I was 9 years old. I knew about God, but I never really asked the Lord to come into my heart really until
personal
later
relationship.
on in life. And to have a personal relationship with Christ, I didn't really know what that meant.
Yeah.
I heard people talk about it, but for some reason, I guess we get caught up in life. And but even with all that, and all the times that I would stray and do things, so many wrong things that would mess my life up, I just felt this presence with me that I can't even explain. And I know it was my mama's prayers, because I know even though she passed away back in 2000, her prayers are still being answered right today.
Wow.
Because I got 4 brothers and 4 sisters, and she wanted all of us to be saved. She wanted all of us to know about Christ. She wanted all of us to, and even though she passed away and some of those prayers hadn't been answered yet, they're still being answered.
Yeah.
I know that. I feel it. And so if I always tell people, if you got a child out there and you don't know what to do, you got to pray, and you got to read the Bible, and you've got to look at your own life and examine your own life. It's like with me, with my children. I couldn't really tell my children what was right and wrong if I was doing what was wrong. It's hard to do it. I mean, of course, you can do it, but then when they look at you and say, well, what kind of example did you set?
Right.
And I got to look back at my life, and I see where I didn't set a great example for my children in some ways, but I've asked Christ into my heart and asked Him to forgive me, and He's even made a lot of those mistakes right somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain that.
Turned it all for good, like He does.
He's turned it all around for good.
Yeah.
And even though I'm still sorry, and I still suffer from the consequences of things that I did wrong.
Right. But that grace.
But grace and the fact that when people see my life, and I looked at my dad's life and saw how bad he had alcoholism and how bad it was, and I could tell you stories that would just chill you to the bone. That I was 12 years old and I didn't even care whether he came home or not. I just didn't care. And then I saw him go up and give his life to the Lord and fall at the altar, and tears come down his face, and then he became my hero.
Oh, wow.
He became my hero. I mean, I saw him save lives. I saw him the real person that he really was.
Yeah. That he was meant to be.
He was meant to be.
Yeah.
Was the person that won out. And
That's awesome.
so it was really, when I saw what God could do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like when my dad said, it wasn't what he did, it's what God did, what He allowed. And my dad had to take credit for something, because we all have to take credit for one thing: submitting ourselves to Christ. And if you submit yourself to Him and say, I want you to come into my heart, He will. And if you really mean it. But if you don't mean it, you better not say it.
Right.
But if you really mean it, all of a sudden things start happening that you can't figure. You don't enjoy those things you used to enjoy, and you don't. And you're like, whoa, what's changed? Well,
right.
He's changing it.
Yeah.
So the best thing you can do is thank Him for every time He gets you out of a situation or takes something away from you that you wanted before that you don't want anymore. Thank Him for it.
Yeah.
Because He's changing your life, and boy, he's really been changing my life, and
That's awesome.
a lot of really, really good things that I can't even explain are happening.
Yeah.
But a lot of things are happening so fast I can't keep up with them.
Yeah.
But
Well, I wanted to ask you about the hymns on the album. Are there any of those? I don't know how you guys did the song selection process, how that went, but are there any of those that have special meaning for you, or that you remember from your family, from your mom, or any of those that you grew up with that you'd have a memory for?
well, just about
all
all
of
of them, they do. Like I said, "How Great Thou Art" is just a standard. I do it in my shows, and I mean it's. I do it at the end of the show because once you do "How Great Thou Art," pretty much the show's over.
Right, right.
But people stand up. These are songs that I wanted. I wanted people to hear that when we went into it. Ben Isaacs did one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard done. But he got everybody together. He said these songs like "Amazing Grace," "How Great Thou Art," "Rock of Ages," and "Precious Memories," they've all been done millions of times by millions of people.
Yeah.
He said, but I really want when people to hear it, they want to hear it like they're hearing it for the first time. And then when I sit back and listen to it, I go, wow, he accomplished that.
Right.
And all I did was just say the words from my heart, and because all these songs affect people, affect everybody. They're favorites of everybody. Yeah. But we did save a few just in case we got to do another one down the road.
That's smart. That's
because
good.
There's some songs that I can talk about later on down the road that the songs that aren't on there, like I had a song called I'll tell you the story. Before the Statler Brothers hired me, I went home to my mom for Thanksgiving in 1981, and I walked in the door and I was really sick because I'd been working 6 nights a week, 4 hours a night playing music, 2 jobs during the day.
Oof.
I was anemic. I was really just burning the candle at both ends. Walked in the door on Thanksgiving morning to get some of that good food of Mama's, and she's like, "My gosh, son, you're really, really, you look bad." She said, and she said, "I'm really worried about you." And then I don't even know why I said it, but I think it was just to make her feel better. But I said, "Mama, something good's going to happen to me. I don't know what it is, but I feel like something really good's going to happen." And I sat down at the table. She put her hands on my shoulders, and she started singing, "It is no secret what God can do, what He's done for others." She sang that whole song to me, sitting there with her hands on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I just felt this power going into me while she was singing that, and I had the tears coming. We had a moment between her and I that was a moment that I will never take. I would take anything for that moment that we had together.
Yeah.
And then right after Christmas, I get a call from the Statler Brothers to come audition, and to make a long story short,
oh my goodness,
that I knew there was something that was from God. That it was a destiny that I was on, and that I just had to ride it, you know. And until He took me to where it was that I didn't know where I was going, but I think I was really going with my mother's prayers were guiding me in my life, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And so that was such a powerful moment. But that song's not on there, but I'm saving that one for next time.
That's good.
But there are some powerful songs on there, like "Rock of Ages." I think that's one of my favorites because, because of Christ, if we let Him be that rock, if we let Him be that stable force in our lives, and it's like in our lives, and then and when you come to the end of your life, you know where you're going, and that song just kind of personifies that whole thing about being in life and letting God be your rock and letting Jesus have control of your life. And then at the end of life, you know, when I rise to worlds unknown and behold Thee on Thy throne, it takes you from here to heaven. That song does. And it was such a powerful song, and I just felt that in my heart when I did that song.
We need those too, don't we? In the world with everything that's going on today, we need the Lord, and we need songs like those to remind us of His goodness and that He is the rock.
And it's amazing, all these songs that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they're still got that meat and that meaning in them. And, you know, I could sit down and write songs. I'm a songwriter. I could sit down and write songs all day that won't even come close to none of that stuff. And it's magical. It's anointed. it's living. You
Yeah.
know, those songs are living.
Yeah.
They're not dead, and they will live forever.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad that I got to be one of God's servants that got to sing those songs.
Yeah.
And do this project.
Well, we're glad too, and we sure know all of our homecoming readers are going to love listening to this album and watching this DVD. And we appreciate your time very much. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. God bless you.